This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so base. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whiles any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day.
Actually, it must be 29 years, I suppose. Almost to a day since I first played here, in the great Lillian's day. Used to be much further back at the end. Under the stalls used to go back at least 3 more rows. That passage behind there wasn't there. Of course, all this proscenium has taken up a good bit of the theatre, too, you see.
Can we go back further than the 29 years that it's been since you first appeared at the Old Vic, Mary? Can I ask you something about All Saints Choir School a long time ago? Acting seems to have been a very important part of the curriculum there.
Yes, it was. We had an extremely lively, really highly artistic priest on the staff. Because you must remember that church, All Saints Margaret Street, is a high Anglican church. As we used to call it in those days, it was Anglo-Catholic. And the priesthood was likely, in those days, went there about 1916, I suppose, to be rather indulge in the flamboyant. These lads, these priests, used to would love to think that they hobnobbed with Sybil Thorndike, and of course be overjoyed absolutely to have ever met Forbes Robertson in their lives.
Actors seem to have come to see a great many of the performances. I think when you were 10 years old, Ellen Terry said, the boy who plays the part of Brutus is already a great actor. Can you remember playing Brutus?
Oh, yes, I do. I do indeed. My father had a story about Forbes Robertson. I never believed it, but my father used to tell it, so I'll tell it for what it's worth. I don't know what it's worth in truth, but he said that he met Forbes Robertson on that occasion. And as he put it, Forbes Robertson had tears in his eyes when my father said, my little boy isn't bad, is he, or something. And he said that Forbes Robertson said, my dear man, he is Brutus, he said. Well, I don't see how I can have been at 10, but still.
Your father was a high Anglican clergyman.
He was a high Anglican clergyman.
Did he have a great deal of influence on your life?
Oh,
Early
yes.
life?
Oh, yes, very much, very much. You see, both my brother and I started, at least with a great sense of ritual.
And it was these elaborate rituals that gave you the idea, perhaps, of acting?
Yes. Oh, yes, and my father's great prowess in the pulpit.
Did your father approve of you going on the stage?
Well, as a matter of fact, although my relationship with him had been extremely distant all my youth, I was terrified of him. He was a very frightening father figure, Victorian father figure. I absolutely worshipped and adored my mother, who died when I was 13 years old, and I often think and say that perhaps I've never got over it. Anyway, my father had to take over, not knowing me very much. I think to him I was rather an unnecessary child. I don't blame him at all, because I was probably very fat and absolutely brainless. But finally, when my brother went to India as an Indian rubber planter, not as an Indian rubber planter, but as an English rubber planter in India, I was filled with the glamour of what my brother was doing, and when we'd seen him off on his boat in Tilbury, we got back home to Letchworth, where my father was rector. I said, well, when can I follow Dickie? out to India, Father, please. About 1 or 2 years. I don't want to go to the university. And my father said, you're talking nonsense. You're going to be an actor.
And this was a complete surprise to you.
Yes, it was. I was amazed that that he'd thought things out for me at all, and B, that he'd thought things out that far. And that he'd had I secretly knew that he was right, that I ought to be an actor.
And so, after this direct exhortation from your father, you went off to the Central School. And there you met an extraordinary woman called Elsie Fogarty.
Yes.
What kind of a woman was she?
Very powerful woman. Very powerful. I remember she said 2 things, one which was quite illuminating and one brilliantly illuminating. And I had to come up to take this scholarship. And so I went up for my examination. And I remember going into the Albert Hall, knocking on the door, asking where the Central School was, being directed to it, and looking in at the Albert Hall on my way and seeing this enormous arena. And I really thought that afternoon I was going to have to be down there all by myself, and that the place was going to be full to hear me do my examination. I really thought that's how ingenuous and stupid I was. However, I made my way to this place, and I was perfectly delighted to see that I was only going to be put 10 yards away from Elsie Fogarty, who was sitting behind a table like this, waiting for me to begin. And I did these, which are the 7 Ages of Man. And afterwards, she said, come down, boy, come down. And she sat me here. And she said, I think you've got a little too strong an idea of the importance of action. It's rather funny. Anybody could say that about me then, age 17. She said, for instance, when you say, it is not really necessary to make fencing movements while you are saying sudden and quick to quarrel. And then she did a marvelous thing, an unforgettable thing, unforgettable thing. She said, you have a weakness here. And she took her little finger and placed it down there, like that. And it's funny. I must have shown some sort of shyness or something, and Beetlebrow said, she said, you have a weakness here. Remember that. Well, something made me slap on all that putty all over my face for years and years afterwards, didn't it? And I dare say it was that.
And after the school, you began looking for work. Had you any idea then what kind of an actor you wanted to be?
No. No, I hadn't, honestly. I knew that experience was necessary, and that's what I was after. I was very vague. Very vague. I had a sort of burning ambition. I didn't know how to place it or what to do with it. I think possibly one of the most strongly contributing facts towards such an ambition was my upbringing. The fact is, I think, that the atmosphere of genteel poverty is probably almost the most fertile ground for ambition that there can be, because you simply say, I want to get out. I'm going to get out. When I get out of this, I will show them. I will show them. I will show them, without having the faintest idea how you're going to show them or what you're going to do to show them. So I simply had this driving. I'm going to be a simply smashing actor. I'm going to be a smashing actor. How? Probably I wanted emotional parts more than any other.
Your first important job was at Birmingham, wasn't it? Birmingham.
That was a very sought-after thing. That if you were a serious actor and went... there were 2 types of actors, one very much less than the other. There was the sort of old boy type of actor. Get a jolly good juvenile part, old boy, on the road, old boy, for £12 a week, old boy. That's the life, old chap. And eventually you get 40 quid a week, old man. There was one very strong influence in the theatre of going into the theatre for what you get out of it, and for the sort of success you make, the sort of clothes you could wear, the sort of golf you could afford to play. Now, there was a shorter list of